Directors Work Session for Thursday, October 13th, 2022. And in interest of making sure that those that are viewing and listening are aware of our delay, I'm going to call Mr. Andrews to explain our dilemma.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
For lack of a better word, Mr. Andrews.
That's fine. Good morning. So for everybody watching, either remotely or in the room, currently we are 2 members short of a quorum. The plan at this point is to go through the presentations, the chair report, and the interim GM CEO report. As those matters don't require any action, we'll have those presentations, and hopefully at that point we'll have a quorum where we'll be able to go through the rest of the work session items, including adoption of the minutes and executive session. That is currently the plan. As I said, so we can go forward in that manner if you'd like, Ms. Chair.
Thank you. With that being said, we will not call for a motion regarding our September 8th, 2022 minutes. We will wait until we are at quorum for that motion. Under our chair's report, I wanted to make sure to share with everyone that we are in the process of scheduling a special called meeting by the Board of Directors with the agenda item to be announced at that time. But we're waiting to hear from all of our board members. Our board is aware of the special called meeting requests, and as soon as we have the date that will work for everyone, we'll make sure that the board is given that specific date. So I just wanted to make sure that we had an update for the board on that particular issue. Also, I would like to recap part of the agenda from the APTA, the American Public Transportation Association meeting that took place in Seattle, Washington, where our very own, and I say our own, Erwin Harlow Parker participated on Saturday with the executive board of APTA to share with us how important it is that we support those that are having mental challenges at this time. Her presentation was very emotional, especially for me, as she shared pictures of her family, and just thinking about what we as MARTA, how we went through and how we had to endure our own tragedy on this year. She shared with us in her presentation, and by the way, I was so moved when those that were there participated and shared with us their own issues of dealing with mental health issues and how important it is that as a corporation, we support our workers, we support our staff, we support our team, to make sure as we continue to go through these issues that we're there for one another and support ourselves as well. One specific issue that I won't call it an issue, that I thought was very important she shared with us is the installation of a number 988. And after that meeting, we actually heard from those that live farther west concerning the fact that this line has already been working in that area. It's a mental health hotline, and it's staffed with those that support mental health issues, not the law enforcement of any kind, but it allows you to dial in, have a conversation, and also receive direction if necessary. So at the end of her presentation, we heard from transportation agencies all over the country that gave their support of making sure that we made this 988 number visible throughout. I think it would be a great idea for our board to look at what we need to do to adopt putting that number for help in our train restrooms, the same as we do for human trafficking. So I thought that was very important, and it was very well received at the national meeting. She also shared with us how it's very important, especially as we support families of those, that we not use the word or the term committed suicide, but rather to use the term died by suicide. It has a different influence on the family, and it also shows that you support. So I wanted to make sure to share these particular issues with us here at MARTA, because we are ones that have had to endure supporting our employees as we went through the very same issue. Lastly, I understand that MARTA is a sponsor of the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention called the Out of Darkness Walk. Suicide is a significant and growing concern for transit agencies, and I can tell you that was shared throughout the meeting from various transit agencies across the country, and MARTA has a personal connection. The walk will be held on Sunday, November 6th. Again, MARTA is a participant. It is called the Out of Darkness Walk. If you would like to walk with Team MARTA, be on the lookout for an email later today with info on how to walk and how to donate. And at this time, that will conclude the portion of my chair's report that I'm able to provide at this time. Thank you, Mr. CEO.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wanted to begin by just kind of bringing the room and those at home watching up to speed on what we've done in terms of the Dekalb and Clayton Pier City tours that took place recently, so a bit of an after-action report, if you will. In general, these were high-intensity, immersive 3-day sessions that we held with county representatives from Dekalb as well as from Clayton. Representatives included county commissioners, mayors, business leaders, state representatives, chambers of commerce, etc. And we had visits with local decision makers and local stakeholders and project sponsors in each of these different cities. The idea being that we wanted to advance critical conversations, very important in implementing BRT and traditional rail transit technologies. We wanted to address the impact that transit connections had across the region with progressive populations and redevelopment, and in both cases, we gained good insight into design, construction, political, and funding challenges involved in delivering high-capacity transit systems. More specifically, with Dekalb, we went to San Diego, so that was September 14th to 16th. We rode BRT corridors and had visits to transit-oriented development sites. We rode the trolley extension on the Mid-Coast trolley and had a lot of insights into a sales tax referendum that they held on the Transnet sales tax. They were able to meet the goal, which was to devise a definitive course of action and established leaders' willingness to share what we've learned with respect to the challenges that we have that we're facing. So the information that we gained and how we apply it will really position Dekalb for success. We included major transit investment decisions, strategic collaboration, critical importance of density and ridership in these decisions. And San Diego left us with a burning message, which was BRT is a progressive solution and not a second-tier option. And that was San Diego's finding in their own work on the matter. So the next steps for Dekalb include things that have already taken place, things that have already set in motion. So Commissioner Davis Johnson held a town hall last Thursday that I participated in by serving on the panel. Next Thursday, we'll see Commissioner Cochran Johnson's special called meeting to tackle the establishment of a stakeholder group, and that will identify transit projects and funding mechanisms. The MARTA South Dekalb Transit Initiative team will kick off public outreach in a series of in-person and virtual meetings during the first week of November. And in partnership with DeKalb County, MARTA is working toward a summer 2023 timeline for the board to adopt an updated LPA for South DeKalb, this time with funding plan and timeline for delivery. In terms of Clayton County specifically, that was Indianapolis between September 21 and September 23rd, the goal there being to gain consensus on actions to advance the BRT along the SR State Route 54 corridor in Clayton County. We saw a strong connection between workforce development, job creation, economic development, and transit improvements. A good example is the Goodwill Industries establishment. They partnered with Cook Medical Supplies on one portion of the Red Line BRT. Just fantastic work. Everyone was very impressed with the establishment and what it meant to the community, with over 300 jobs, college funding, health insurance, even a grocery store in a former food desert. So a lot of good things happening on the BRT route. They were really all about intentional collaborative work with the community and partnerships to help the underserved in our communities. So next steps for Clayton include the October 4th Board of Commissioners date, where they adopted a resolution, and that resolution was to ask MARTA to pivot from commuter rail transit to BRT on the State Route 54 corridor. In response, we anticipate that the MARTA Board Planning and Capital Programs Committee will take up a resolution on November 17th with full MARTA Board adoption, hopefully on December 8th. So in the meantime, MARTA staff and Clayton Citizens Advisory Board met last night to begin work on public engagement strategies and tactics for communication and messaging. We anticipate finalization of that plan on November 9th, and we will be rolling out with information after that. And then further engagement of other elected officials will happen next Thursday, October 20th, in a hometown connection session. It's a meeting of all the municipalities, the commissioners, the state delegation on transit, MARTA, and the updated State Route 54 approach. And finally, I just want to mention that we will share photos and video links with you by email later today to really summarize the effect of both of these Pier City tours. So we felt that that was very successful, mission accomplished in terms of what we had hoped to achieve, and in terms of setting us up for next steps on these critical conversations. Next, I would like to invite Anthony Thomas up, and Anthony's going to talk to us about MARTA Reach. We had promised that this 6-month pilot would be analyzed and that we would come back to you with our major findings, and we've also committed to our jurisdictional partners that after this meeting we will roll out to them and let them know what we found, what we've learned, and how we may be able to apply what we've learned in the future. So without further ado, Anthony, over to you.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Chair Scott, Mr. Greenwood, and members of the MARTA Board of Directors. My name is Anthony Thomas, and today I would like to provide a briefing on the initial evaluation of the MARTA Reach On-Demand pilot. Today's briefing will cover the initial findings of the service pilot, covering overall ridership, rider demographics, and rider satisfaction. There is significant ongoing work between MARTA customer experience, research and analysis, and multiple research teams at Georgia Tech to further analyze the project. Next slide, please. As a reminder, through the service pilot, MARTA is aiming to learn whether riders are interested in using on-demand transit, what ridership may look like, and what types of trips riders are using the service for, whether this is a cost-effective way of serving transit demand, and whether there are zonal differences in zones with different land use patterns. Now that the pilot service has completed, we have answers to some of these questions, and we have collected the data to evaluate the others. Next slide, please. So now that we've set the stage, let's jump into the fun stuff. The Reach service ended on August 31st at 7 p.m. Over the 6-month period that the service was running, we served 8,335 riders. There were 739 unique accounts served over this period, meaning that most of the riders were repeat riders. The average wait time for the service was around 7 minutes, and most trips were about 9 minutes long. Next slide, please. Diving deeper into the ridership numbers, here I am showing the ridership growth of the pilot over the 6-month period. As you can see, there was a steady increase in ridership throughout the service. 35% of all trips in the pilot were taken in the month of August, which was the final month of service. That leads me to my first major takeaway. There is a lag between the introduction of a new service and the ridership response. In the case of Reach, this lag can be fairly long, as it is not only a new service, but is a new type of service. It takes riders some time to learn how it works, learn whether or not it's dependable, and learn how to fit it into their daily lives. Next slide, please. Breaking the data out further shows something potentially more interesting. August was the highest ridership month of the pilot. The last week of August was the highest ridership week of the pilot, and August 31st, the last day of service, was the highest ridership day of the service. I think it's clear to say that it's possible that the growth of the REACH service had not yet plateaued, which brings me to takeaway 2. The duration of a service pilot, the duration of a service pilot will likely impact the results. Because we chose a 6-month pilot duration, we may not actually know what the extent of the demand was for the service. Further, limitations in the availability of operators made it impossible for MARTA to extend the pilot for risk of impacting our other services. So really the takeaway here is we got those 8,300 trips during the pilot duration, but we don't actually know what the maximum ridership of the service might be because we had to end it after 6 months. Next slide, please. Breaking the ridership out by zone, we see that West Atlanta delivered the lion's share of the ridership, with 58% of the riders coming from that zone. Our takeaway here is that the zone characteristics and available connecting services highly impacts the ridership. Next slide, please. This slide shows some of the demographics of our REACH riders. The ages of the riders are fairly split, with a slight majority in the range of 25 to 34 years old. The genders of the riders are also proportional to the service areas and in line with what we might expect. Next slide, please. About 58% of REACH riders self-identified as Black, 24% as white, 5% as Latino, 5% multiracial, and 4% Asian and Pacific Islander. All household incomes were represented in the REACH ridership, with the majority self-reporting as low income. Next slide, please. Here, we asked REACH riders how they may have taken their trip if the on-demand service was not available. As you can see, REACH did in fact divert some trips from single occupancy vehicles, carpooling, and rideshare. It is clear here that on-demand transit is a way to decrease the dependence on driving, but the increased flexibility offered by the on-demand service may also divert some existing transit trips. Any further use of on-demand should look at how the on-demand service works in tandem with our fixed route services to ensure that we maximize the use of both on-demand and fixed route. Next slide, please. I'm super proud of this one. Over 94% of those who responded to the rider survey indicated that they were either satisfied or very satisfied with the REACH service. Of the same group, 75% of them said that they were satisfied or very satisfied with MARTA service overall. The key takeaway here is that riders are highly satisfied with on-demand service. We intend to dive a little bit deeper in our further analysis to understand what the differences were that drove this difference in satisfaction. Next slide, please. So now that we've gone over some of the initial data from the REACH pilot service, I have some lessons learned that I'd like to share. These are by no means all of the lessons learned from the pilot, but we're sharing these to help frame how MARTA can think about on-demand and service pilots in general. First, ridership on on-demand is driven by connections to other reliable, high-frequency services. When crafting on-demand zones, we should think about what the connections are, where they are, and communicate them with our potential riders. Next, the technology must anticipate real-world behavior and be built to accommodate and mitigate potential human error. When developing on-demand zones, stops should be in safe, accessible locations, both for our patrons and for our operators. The number of idle locations and layover locations impact service quality. Any on-demand system should be created to maximize the number of allowable idle locations so that the service is most efficient. And finally, word of mouth is critically important. We must improve our community engagement processes so that we encourage the community spread of information. Next slide. One of the most important components of learning about on-demand transit at MARTA is understanding the associated costs. To do this, we are conducting a benefit cost analysis of various potential future scenarios for on-demand transit. Scenario 1 is a fully contractor-supported model, when where a vendor provides all vehicles and operators and is fully responsible for all operations and maintenance. Scenario 2 is a partially contractor-supported model where MARTA provides vehicles and maintenance, and the vendor provides the operations and operators. Scenario 3 is a fully MARTA-supported scenario where MARTA provides the vehicles and is responsible for all operations and maintenance. Under each of these three scenarios, MARTA would need to secure the application and the routing technology from a private vendor. We anticipate sharing the findings of the staffing and operations assessment when we next return to the board. Next slide, please. So speaking of next returning to the board, the team anticipates being able to return in either December or January to share more detailed findings in our analysis with you all. That analysis will include the findings from the benefit cost analysis that I just mentioned, as well as our findings on the on-demand impacts to access, overall zonal characteristics impacts on the service, service optimization, and much more. Following that analysis, we will share all findings with our next-gen bus project team so that they can use it to inform the development and next steps of that project. Next slide. Before I conclude, I would like to thank several teams that made this project a reality. First, internally, I give my sincerest thanks to the teams at the Mobility Oversight, Technology, Research and Analysis, Planning, Contracts and Procurement, and Grants. I would also like to thank the multiple teams at Georgia Tech that are led by Dr. Pascal Van Hintenrich, Dr. Carrie Watkins, Dr. Subro Guhartha-Kurta, and Dr. Chris Ledantek. And with that, I conclude my remarks and open to any questions from the board.
Am I? Mr. Durrett?
Anthony, that was an excellent presentation.
Thank you.
I can't come up with a question. I just wanted to say thank you very much for managing this very important project. As we are talking with transit entities around the country through APTA and just our friendships, it's very clear that on-demand transit is up and coming, an important element of any complete transit package. So thank you for a job well done.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Snyder, and then Mr. Floyd.
Thank you, Ms. Chairwoman. Anthony, thank you for the presentation. It was very well done. I appreciate your effort. A couple of questions. One, did we get any feedback from riders about the software, the app that we were using? And the second question is, how did we express to them that the program was ending and it would probably be coming back?
Great. So the first part of that, we got lots of feedback on the app. Obviously, some of that feedback was kind of, there was a learning curve to any new kind of technology, and so it was kind of communicating to them how that service works and what the differences are with our fixed route service and with our existing paratransit service. But some of the kind of the core feedback that we got was that the way that the service model worked was a virtual stop to virtual stop model. So we had identified stops out in the field in coordination with our planning team. And so there was a little bit of confusion as to how to identify what the virtual stop was. So we did implement some changes to the application to make that easier. For example, the individual could put in their address and it would identify the closest virtual stop. But I think some people were used to using kind of the traditional TNCs where they put in the address and the service picks them up at that address. And that is something that's definitely possible in an on-demand service. That's just kind of not how our platform was built. So that was kind of one of the major pieces of feedback that we heard. Second, regarding how we communicated with people that the service was ending. One of the best parts about this service was everyone had to kind of give us some sort of contact information to be able to use the service. So we had email addresses of every person that had ever used the service or signed up for the service. So we sent a couple different emails to that distribution list to let them know. We also used social media to let folks know that was ending. For people that called into the call center to make a trip request, we let them know starting 2 weeks in advance that the service was coming to an end at the end of service on August 31st. We also, in the application after the service ended, there's a splash screen, which I believe is probably still up, that says that the service ended as of August 31st, and that if people had feedback that they could reach out to us at reach@itsmarta.com.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Floyd?
Yeah, a couple of things. Probably 10 or 15 years ago, cities were looking at transportation issues, and it was obvious, it wasn't obvious to me, but it was obvious to a lot of people that we were using the same methods to design roads and stuff that we had used 20 years before, but everything was changing. And so I say that to ask the question, it looks to me like everything is changing. And we don't really know what transit's going to look like in 25 years. Maybe it's all these little buses running around picking up people without drivers. I mean, you know, I'm not smart enough to figure that out. But it does appear to me that where's the discussion about what does this lead to? Where does it go? How does it work? Now, and I'll ask one more question that's probably a little easier to answer, but we restricted this work to specific areas. Is one of the next steps is if it's viable and what it costs, is it a region-wide service or is it still restricted to specific areas? And then maybe somehow you could, you smart guys could say, where's this leading us in the discussion? When are we beginning to talk about what does it look like 20 years from now, you know?
Sure. I think the way that I would answer that is kind of in two parts. I think obviously here at MARTA we have the responsibility of operating a transit service and getting people from point A to point B kind of in the existing conditions of where we are now. But I think that that's why the partnership with Georgia Tech was so critical, because I think that they have the flexibility to really be thinking about what transportation looks like in 10, 15, or 20 years. And I know that is something that Dr. Pascal is actually thinking about very actively, and how we can deploy this type of service kind of at a larger scale. And so the partnership was kind of mutually beneficial because we got to understand how on-demand transit works in MARTA, and then his team got to understand, all right, well, this is a large deployment of this. Can we validate some of our assumptions for how this might work? And so I think that it was a really kind of interesting partnership between us and Georgia Tech from that respect. I think in regards to the other part of your question, all of our findings from this pilot will be shared with the Next Gen Bus project team, and they will incorporate it into their thinking on kind of the network as a whole. And I think that that's the critical piece of it, and that was kind of one of the takeaways when we talk about using this service to connect to highly reliable, highly frequent service. They will be thinking about how to do that on the fixed route side, and then how to create, how to use the on-demand service to connect to that network. So thinking about the network as a whole, I think is the critical piece. My expectation is that in the future, this would still be limited to particular zones that are identified through that process. But the beauty of on-demand transit is that it's very scalable. And so if we chose at a later date to expand it, to add new zones, we very well could.
One follow-up, if you don't mind. This Georgia Tech doctor, the takeaways that you've listed here, are they MARTA's or are they his or are they a joint exception? And I mean, when do we say, okay, here's what we got out of this, and here's where we think it ought to go?
Sure.
I haven't seen that yet. Maybe it's up there and I just didn't see it. But
no, we're still working on that. The takeaways that I listed were really kind of a combination from internally at MARTA, some of the folks that are really good at operations at the mobility oversight team, as well as some of the conversations that we've had with the Georgia Tech team, particularly on kind of the efficiencies that you get when you have more layover spaces. And so it was kind of a combination set of takeaways. But the expectation is that once we've kind of done that further analysis, we will both come back to the board, but we'll also kind of write a report that kind of summarizes all of the findings from the work, and that will obviously be presented to you all, and then again incorporate into that Next Gen Bus project. And they will be the ones that are really thinking holistically about how on-demand and fixed route work together.
okay, well, I think it was an excellent compilation of data and all that, but is it most of the time what you do with it now becomes the hard part?
Absolutely.
What does it mean and what do you do with it? So good luck is all I can tell you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Floyd.
All right. Anthony, thank you very much. There were a couple points, there were times where I was going to chime in and answer some of the questions, but the way you responded were just great answers, so thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Thank you very much.
And then finally, what I'd like to do through the interim GM CEO report is just talk about some upcoming events and meetings of significance. So I won't go into details about the MARTA board committee meetings or the MARTA board meetings. Those are in your agenda package. But I will draw some highlight to the ARC State of the Region breakfast, which is happening at the Georgia World Convention Center on Friday, October 28th, 7:30 a.m. to 10 a.m. Also like to point out that the Riders Advisory Council will have a meeting, a virtual meeting on November 2nd from 6 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. and the MARTA Accessibility Committee virtual meeting on November 8th from 10 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. And with that, Madam Chair, I'll return the floor to you.
Thank you. A couple of things I'd like to share. Also, this month, October, is Breast Cancer Awareness Month. The Empowering Women's Group of MARTA invites you to participate in our breast cancer awareness program. It is scheduled for Thursday, October 20th from 12 p.m. to 1 p.m. in the atrium at the MARTA headquarters. And also, may I suggest to everyone, men and women, find you a partner during the month of October to remind them to make sure that they are screened for breast cancer. It is so important, whether you're a male or female. If you're a male, you have a mother, you may have a sister, an aunt, anyone else that you can remind. I can tell you that it helped to save my life. So please do so. With that being said, it is prudent that we suspend with the regular order of business for the MARTA. Pardon me? Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, Ms. Abdul Salam. I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you. I didn't see a hand. Yes, Ms. Salam.
I wanted to, if I may, go back to Mr. Greenwood's report for a moment. My service was interrupted and had to get put back on. So I wanted to ask a question that he was talking about the resolution following the Clayton County trip to Indianapolis. And I think I spoke with him about this. In that resolution that the county commission passed, it only mentions the State Route 54 corridor, and it only mentions the South Clayton community. And I think that we need to actually go back and make sure that we include Riverdale and North Clayton in that resolution. So I spoke with Chairman Turner about it as well. I think it's just an oversight, but Riverdale and the North Clayton area was the first area that was going to get BRT, and it has morphed into several changes since then, but I think that it needs to be included in the resolution.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Abdul Salam. We'll address that specifically.
Thank you.
Thank you. And for those of you who, Mr. Frison and Ms. Roberta Abdul Salam is joining us via Teams. Are there any other comments or questions from those that are joining us via Teams? Hearing none. Mr. Andrews, please let me know if this is correct, and that is that at this time it is prudent that we suspend with the regular order of business as we do not have the quorum for an official vote. We will reconvene at the time we reach such. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am. I think to put a finer point on it is, at this point, we don't have a quorum, so we're not really having a meeting, so we can't take any official action. So as soon as, it's my understanding that one or two more board members are on their way, and as soon as they arrive, we can begin the work session portion of our agenda for the day at that time.
Thank you. Not only, but the items that are left are items that require a vote. And
Correct.
For that reason, it will be necessary for us to suspend at this time. And we will reconvene as we reach quorum. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Ash. At this time, we will reconvene the October 13th, 2022 MARTA Board of Directors work session. Now that we have quorum, may I have a motion for approval of the September 8th, 2022 work session minutes? Thank you.
Are we going to do this electronically?
I second that
I
motion.
think we need to do it electronically.
Second, okay.
I don't see anything. Oh, here it is.
Is it on? Okay, thank you. Is it? Let us vote. The motion has passed. The minutes of the September 8th, 2022 work session have been adopted. At this time, we're going to call our executive session to order. Thank you.
I'd like to move that we go into executive session for the purpose of discussing litigation, personnel matter, and real estate.
Let us vote. So move. We will move into executive session at this time. Thank you.
She should say.
You have to officially go into executive session.
All right, you got it. Switch over there. I'm not on the. Was it muted for you too? You had it muted, right?
I just muted it when she went to executive session. It's still on by now, right? Yeah. Ah, damn, it's so nice.
I didn't want that big fish on maybe later. Damn, 30 minutes. We'll change this. Stop. What was the one?
Thank you. Mr. Andrews?
Okay.
It's still on by now.
At this time, you call the executive session. October 13, 2022 Board of Directors meeting. We apologize for the time as advertised has not been, but we are now ready for our agenda. Mr. Andrews?
Yes, Madam Chair, there are 3 matters that need to be added under the other matters portion of the agenda. There's 3 resolutions. I can read the 3 captions in, and you can vote on a whole to amend the agenda if you'd like.
Absolutely, thank you.
The first one will be a resolution of the MARTA Board of Directors appointing a member of the board of a member to the board of the Technology and Energy Enhancement Authority. The second matter will be a resolution granting a conditional waiver from the MARTA Code of Ethics to WSP USA to contract with MARTA while Manjit Renew is employed by WSP USA prior to the 6 months from the conclusion of his voluntary termination of employment with MARTA. The third one is a resolution authorization to enter into negotiations with Peebles Corporation, Bolster Real Estate Partners, Exact Capital, and Third and Urban, the developer for development of parcels D5015 at Bankhead Station, RFP 47501.
I move to amend the agenda to add those items. I'll second that.
Let us vote. So moved. The additional items are added to the agenda. Mr. Andrews, do we have any public comments via email or voicemail?
Yes, ma'am. We have one email from Dr. Ed Williams. He sent it at 9:04 a.m. this morning. On behalf of in his capacity as chair of the Concerned Citizens for Effective Government, Mr. Williams is suggesting that the MARTA committed an open meetings violation by holding a special called meeting of the GM CEO Search Committee and making a recommendation of colleague Greenwood as the sole finalist for the position of GM CEO. And he gives his legal reasoning for it in the email, and that this entire email will be entered into the board minutes for your review and approval at the next board meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Andrews. In regards to the public comments here on today, the public will not be allowed to yield or donate time to other speakers. The public comment portion of the meeting will not exceed 45 minutes. If the 45-minute time limit is reached before public comments are completed, public comments will be suspended and the board meeting will commence. Public comments will resume at the end of the board meeting. At this time, we do have 3 public comments present. First, Ms. Shanita Chandler. Is Ms. Chandler here? Please come forward to the mic, Ms. Chandler.
Hi, okay, so I wanted to address a few issues that I have contacted customer service.
We're having a little difficulty hearing you. Thank you.
Okay, is that better? I wanted to address a few issues that I've contacted customer service about. The first issue, the customer service related issues are safety, rail safety, bus safety, bus and rail cleanliness, and driver behavior. Okay, because some of the drivers are very rude. Some of them pull off when they see patrons and riders approaching the buses if they're not at the bus stop. Like, it may not be too much of a distance between the driver and the stop. The patron and the stop, and some of the drivers are continuing to ride past the drivers. Cleanliness, Some of the buses and trains are completely filthy and disgusting. They have really bad odor, and I think that's inappropriate because you all do have people who work to do the cleaning. Safety, some of the trains are jumping rails. Some of them feel like we're on roller coaster rides somewhere at Six Flags or something. And some of the streets have holes and, of course, speed bumps, but the drivers aren't careful enough when approaching or driving across those road damages. And like I said, the behavior, some of them are very rude. But I also wanted to speak on claims and litigations in particular to my case. They were denied. My name is Shanita Chandler, and I would appreciate it if you all would look into those issues.
Thank you, Ms. Chandler.
Okay.
Next, we will hear from Senator Vincent Fort. Thank you, Senator Fort.
Madam Chair, members of the board, I am here today to communicate my concerns that projects in the African American communities that you serve are being downgraded and or delayed. I've been to this microphone before to talk about the bait and switch on Hamilton Road from rail to buses. I am really concerned about the delays in the Summerhill project, apparently due to incompetence and cost estimates, and the what I perceive to be an attempt to downgrade from heavy rail in Dekalb. This goes on while the streetcar to nowhere, with almost no riderships, gets $200 million for extension to the Beltline. MARTA was born in equity efforts, now discriminates against communities of color. It is unclear how much the Beltline will get for the rail that they are, but my back of the envelope math tells me that at $100,000 per mile, $100 million per mile, that the Beltline will get $2.5 billion. I'm sure that those cost estimates are Paleolithic, very old, but there is this board, by the decisions that you make, you have an impact on communities, particularly on communities of color. And I am concerned that y'all are violating the trust between those who are most in need of transit. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Klein.
Thank you very much. My name is Hans Klein. I'm on the faculty of the School of Public Policy at Georgia Tech. I'm also one of the co-founders of the website www.savethebeltline.net, which is a group of activists and concerned citizens concerned about loss of the park-like qualities of the Beltline if we run transit on the Beltline. So I'm making here 3 comments. First of all, the issue of safety on the Beltline right now is a big one. There's a problem of mixed modes of cyclists and pedestrians who are hitting each other and injuring each other. And the opportunity, if there's going to be a streetcar on the Beltline, there's an opportunity to address the problem of safety and to get the to separate the modes by adding a cycle track onto the Beltline. So at the September 12th meeting of MARTA at Dad's Garage, it was verified that it is technically feasible to have transit and the current pedestrian track and a cycle track, a new cycle track added should there be transit run on the Beltline there. So separating the modes would address the safety problem on the Beltline by adding a cycle track. Another point is the question of a little bit on equity and just on transit demand. Transit demand, I believe, is much greater on the south side of town, where we have heavy transit usage by people of lesser means. The logic of meeting demand would suggest that transit should be prioritized where the demand is greater on the south side of town. And finally, in general, it's unfortunate that running the streetcar on the Beltline creates a conflict between those who love parks and those who love transit. If there's a way to reconcile the conflict between parks and transit, possibly by routing transit on street right-of-ways rather than park right-of-ways, that would be terrific. The Beltline is a wonderful park. Let's not sacrifice it for transit. Maybe we can have transit and an uncompromised park. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Klein. That concludes the in-person public comments at this time. May I have a motion for the approval of the minutes of the September 8th, 2022 MARTA Board of Directors meeting minutes? May I have a second? Do I hear a second? I'm looking. Second by Ms. Blakely. Thank you. Let us vote. The motion has passed. The minutes are adopted. At this time, we will call our Planning and Capital Programs Committee present. At this time, Mayor Floyd.
Madam Chair, the Planning and Capital Programs Committee met on Thursday, September 29th, 2022. Approved the following resolution. A resolution authorizing a modification in contractual authorization for professional services for payment and booking system for art in transit vendors, LOA L44-267. A resolution authorizing approval of the fiscal year 2023 bus, rail, and mobility service standards. I request approval of these resolutions.
Second.
So moved. Let us vote. Thank you, Mr. Floyd. The resolution has passed.
All right, thank you. The committee received the following briefing on FY 2022 Quarter 4 Capital Programs Quarterly Update. Madam Chair, on behalf of Chairman Al Pond, who's wandering around in Europe somewhere, this concludes my report.
Thank you, Mr. Floyd. At this time, we will hear via Teams from Ms. Abdul Salam regarding the Operations and Safety Committee report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Operations and Safety Committee met on Thursday, September 29th, 2022, and approved the following resolutions. A, resolution authorizing the award of a single source contract for the procurement of subscription and data retention services, ZONAR RFPP P50177. B, resolution authorizing the award of contracts for the procurement of bus and rail vehicle consulting services, REI AE 50114. C, resolution authorizing a modification in contractual authorization for technical support and spare supply services for the Atlanta streetcar S70 light rail vehicles FC-9839. D, resolution authorizing a modification in contractual authorization for MARTA Uber partnership during severe service disruption, LOA L46827. And resolution authorizing a modification in contractual authorization for MARTA Lyft partnership, LOA L48275. I request approval of these resolutions.
So moved.
Thank you. Let us vote.
I can't see what's happening, so will you let me know?
Yes, ma'am.
Is that approval?
Ms. Abdul Salam, the resolutions have passed.
Okay, the committee also received the following briefing. MARTA Connect contracts. Madam Chair, this concludes my report.
Thank you, Ms. Abdul Salam. Next, we will hear from the Business Management Committee, Mr. Jim Durrett.
Madam Chair, the Business Management Committee met on Thursday, September 29th, 2022, and approved the following resolutions. A, resolution authorizing the solicitation of proposals for the procurement of group health and flexible spending benefit plans, RFP P50213. B, resolution authorizing the award of a contract for the procurement of employee assistance program services, RFPP P50154-A. C, resolution authorizing the award of a contract for the procurement of Palo Alto firewalls, RFPP P50220, utilizing the Federal General Services Administration contract. D, resolution authorizing the award of a contract for the procurement of Arista switches and maintenance, RFP P50221, utilizing the Federal General Services Administration contract. E, a resolution authorizing a modification in contractual authorization for MARTA Communications Service Manager, L39782. And F, resolution authorizing a modification in contractual authorization for specialized professional services, RFP P47520. I request approval of these resolutions.
Thank you. It's been presented and second. Let us vote. Thank you, Mr. Durrett. The resolutions have passed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This concludes our report.
Thank you. At this time, we will hear from Mr. Andrews regarding a following resolution as well as the additional agenda items.
Yes, ma'am. So number 5 on the agenda is a resolution authorizing the execution of an intergovernmental agreement, IGA, between Clayton County and MARTA for a program coordinator position. This was tabled from the September 8th, 2022 board meeting. The approval of the resolution, the resolution has not changed since then. We just were holding off to make sure we had enough people to vote on this. I believe the recommendation at that time from committee was to approve the resolution. So it's before you. We'll need a motion to either approve or deny and a vote.
May I have a recommendation on the resolution?
I'll move.
It's done.
Ms. Fowler?
No, I just said I'd move.
It's done.
It is done. Okay, I was looking for a second. Let us vote. Thank you. The resolution has passed.
Madam Chair, I'm sorry, it popped up and went away. The, was it 7 votes or 8 votes?
It's off of my screen. Give me just a
Everybody but Heather.
Okay,
Heather voted as many times as she could.
right. Was Miss Abdul Salam's vote counted?
Ms. Abdul Salam, we'd like to capture your vote. Can we hear? Is she voted?
That will be an affirmative vote.
Thank you. Please record the affirmative vote for Ms. Abdul Salam.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next matter under other matters would be the resolution of the MARTA Board of Directors appointing a member of the board, or to the board of the Technology and Energy Enhancement Authority. Because we haven't, let me read the whole resolution, and sorry, Mr. Ash.
Mr. Ash, calm.
Whereas pursuant to the passage of House Bill 762 during the 2021 legislative session of the Georgia General Assembly, the Fulton Technology and Energy Enhancement Authority, TEA, was created, and whereas the TEA is charged with identifying, targeting, and alleviating the specific elements relating to the underdevelopment of technological resource and energy in those areas of Fulton County where such advancements are lacking. And whereas the TEA is governed by a board consisting of 7 members, and whereas one of the members of the TEA board is to be appointed by the MARTA Board of Directors, and whereas in May of 2021, the MARTA Board of Directors appointed Colleague Greenwood to the TEA board, and whereas following his appointment as interim GM CEO of MARTA, in January of 2022, Mr. Greenwood delegated his spot to Raj Srinath, Chief Financial Officer of MARTA, and the MARTA Board wishes to formalize the delegation of the spot to Mr. Srinath. Now, therefore, be it resolved, the Board of Directors of the Metropolitan Atlanta Rapid Transit Authority hereby ratifies the delegation by Mr. Greenwood and appoints Raj Srinath, Chief Financial Officer, to serve on the TEA Board of Directors.
Do I hear a motion?
I'll move approval.
Thank you. Second? Let us vote. The resolution has passed. Thank you.
The second one is a
Did
resolution.
you record my vote, Madam Chair?
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. I just want to make sure my vote is recorded.
Yes.
Affirmative.
So recorded,
Thank you.
Ms. Abdul Salam.
Second one is a resolution granting a conditional waiver from the MARTA Code of Ethics to WSP USA to contract with MARTA while Manjeet Renew is employed by WSP USA prior to the 6 months from the conclusion of his voluntary termination of employment with MARTA. Whereas Manjeet Renew held the position of Chief of Capital Programs, Expansion and Innovation until September 23, 2022, having tendered his voluntary resignation on September 6, 2022, the first business day after accepting a conditional offer of employment with WSP USA for the position of Senior Vice President, National Planning, contingent on MARTA confirmation of Code of Ethics compliance. And whereas the MARTA Code of Ethics, as amended on March 1, 2022, Section 13, is interpreted to prohibit MARTA from contracting existing and future contracts with a vendor that employs a former MARTA employee within 6 months from the termination of employment date, and whereas WSP USA currently has multiple contracts with MARTA and may seek future new contracts with MARTA during the 6-month period established in Section 13 of the MARTA Code of Ethics, and whereas the MARTA Code of Ethics, Section 18, directs an initial question of interpretation of the Code of Ethics to the Chief Legal Counsel, and whereas Chief Legal Counsel, a member of MARTA's management, opined that based on past Board of Directors precedent on substantially similar matters, the Board of Directors is the appropriate venue for rendering a decision on a waiver from the provision of Section 13 prohibiting existing and new contract work with MARTA by WSP USA within the 6-month period commencing from Mr. Renew's conclusion of employment with MARTA. And whereas Section 1 of the MARTA Code of Ethics designates the Board of Directors as the decision maker on a waiver from the code. And whereas the Board of Directors have reviewed this request and found that WSP should not be prohibited from contracting with MARTA within 6 months of Mr. Renew leaving his employment with MARTA. Now, be it therefore resolved by the Board of Directors of the Metropolitan Atlanta Rapid Transit Authority on this 13th day of October 2022 that a waiver from the provision of Section 13 of the MARTA Code of Ethics or any other provision of the Code of Ethics prohibiting WSP USA from maintaining existing contracts or entering into new contracts during the 6-month period following the conclusion of Mr. Renew's employment with MARTA is hereby granted, provided that WSP USA is prohibited from utilizing Mr. Renew on any MARTA project for a period of 6 months following the conclusion of Mr. Renew's employment, and is forever prohibited from utilizing Mr. Renew for the forthcoming procurement of the immediate next general planning contract and the I-285 top end express lane transit projects. Approved on the 13th day of October 2022 by the Metropolitan Atlanta Rapid Transit Authority Board of Directors.
I'll move approval of the resolution.
Thank you. Let us vote.
I vote yes.
Thank you, Ms. Abdul Salam. The resolution has passed. I believe there is one additional. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am. The final one is authorization to enter into negotiations with Peebles Corporation, Bolster Real Estate Partners, Exact Capital, and Third and Urban, the developer for development of parcels D5015 at Bankhead Station, RFP 47501. Whereas on January 13th, 2022, the Metropolitan Atlanta Rapid Transit Authority duly sent to potential offerors notice of its request for proposals for the development of parcel D5015 at Bankhead Station. And whereas notice of the said request for proposals was advertised in the local newspaper of the largest circulation in the Atlanta metropolitan area once in each of the 2 weeks prior to the proposal deadline, and whereas all proponents were given the opportunity to protest the proposal instructions, specifications, and/or procedures, and whereas on May 4, 2022 at 2 p.m. local time, 3 proposals were received. And whereas the authority staff determined that People's Corporation, Bolster Real Estate Partners, Exact Capital, and Third and Urban submitted the most advantageous offer and other factors considered and is technically and financially capable of providing the services. Resolved, therefore, by the Board of Directors of the Metropolitan Atlanta Rapid Transit Authority that the interim general manager, CEO, or his delegate be and hereby is authorized to enter into negotiations to develop a term sheet with People's Corporation, Bolster Real Estate Partners, Exact Capital, and Third and Urban for the procurement of request for proposals number P47501, development of parcel 5015 at Bankhead Station.
Move approval of that resolution.
Second.
Let us vote, if you could hear.
Record a yes for me, please.
Yes, Ms. Abdul-Salam. The resolution has passed. Are there any other matters to come before the board at this time? Hearing none.
Move to adjourn.
Any comments from the board prior to adjournment? Mr. Durrett? Seeing none. We are now adjourned, Mr. Ash.